Welcome to Alimentary, the podcast series where you will learn about your amazing body, how it works, and of course why food is so important, and also pick up some simple recipe and lifestyle tips and tweaks to help you to influence your health in a positive way. According to an article in The Lancet, a 2017 study identified gastroesophageal reflux disease as an important cause of non-fatal health loss, which is increasing because of its association with age and the aging of the global population. Basically, GERD or GORD, depending on how you spell esophageal, some people drop the O, is increasing. And while it's not fatal and it's a condition that we can manage with medication, it can impact our health in the long term and absolutely impacts our enjoyment of our food. Now, we can adjust our diet and stress levels to manage it with lifestyle as much as possible, and really all the better if we can reduce our reliance on, for example, PPIs, which are proton pump inhibitors. Now, when we take these in the long term, they can have an adverse effect. And I suppose when you think about it, if they're suppressing our stomach acid, this can reduce our ability to absorb our B12 and our iron from the protein in our food. It just makes it harder to break down, particularly proteins. Now, of course, I'm not saying stop taking medication if you're on it, but obviously work with your lifestyle and with your doctor to see if you can reduce it or come off it. You know, that would be a medical decision. So in this episode of Alimentary, I am delighted to be having a chat with Lauren O'Connor, who is a dietitian with her own personal experience of dealing with gastroesophageal reflux disease. We discuss what it is, causes and drivers, and how she manages it. We also chatted about lactose intolerance, which can be one of the drivers of GERD. Now, Lauren O'Connor is a private practice dietitian, 5-time cookbook author and freelance writer with a passion for gut health, fitness and culinary nutrition. She's a regular contributor to health and wellness publications with numerous articles in Health and Live Strong. On her website, nutrisavvyhealth.com, she shares evidence-based nutrition advice and a wide variety of gut-healthy recipes for everyday living. Lauren is also a yoga teacher and enjoys hiking in her local hills. And one thing I forgot to ask her about, actually, she's a member of the community singing group Band of Singers. So I'll put links to all of her socials and her website in the show notes. And join me in welcoming Lauren to Alimentary. So, Lauren, it is absolutely lovely to talk to you. Now, it's evening where I am, but I think it's midday where you are in California. Yes.
Yes. It's afternoon here, full and sunny.
I know. I can see the sun coming in. It was about 3 degrees centigrade here today, so it's a little bit chilly. Yes, we had to light the fire now this evening, So looking forward to spring. I'm sure it's just around the corner for us. But you were safe during the recent fires. Where you were okay? Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Yes, we were lucky to not have to evacuate, but certainly we could see the embers, the fires, everything. It was really, the air quality was really bad for quite some time, even after the fire. So,
oh my gosh.
Yes, we were lucky. Some of our friends were not, and they had to evacuate. And some lost their homes, sadly.
My gosh. Yeah, it's a very scary time for people, I'm sure, It seems like the community got, banded together and supported each other really well. So that's lovely. But I'm glad that you and yours were all safe and sound. So you're so good for coming on the podcast today, and we're going to chat about something which actually a lot of my clients, a lot of people actually suffer from, and that's GERD and or reflux, So maybe will we start off by maybe just chatting through the differences between actual gastroesophageal reflux disease and just plain old, reflux or a bit of heartburn. Would you mind maybe taking us through the differences there?
Sure. And it is a mouthful to say, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Reflux disease.
Yeah.
Yes. So acid reflux, actually, everybody has a bit of acid reflux happening daily, right? But it's not enough to make a difference. And it's just because we have a valve called the lower esophageal sphincter. And this is what allows the food and the nutrients to come down into our stomachs so that we can have the nutrients and metabolize. But it closes so that the acids from the from the stomach, which are needed to digest those food, do not come back up the esophagus. So what happens with just regular acid reflux, we all get on occasion. When we say acid reflux, we're saying like, okay, I ate a huge meal,
Yes.
stomach doesn't feel good, got my heartburn, maybe a little bit of throat burn. Okay, maybe you went to bed too early, you had just eaten, you still have all that food to digest. GERD is when this acid reflux happens at least twice or more a week, okay, for several weeks. So it's a chronic incidence of having that extreme acid refluxing up the esophagus.
Okay. And I guess then your esophagus, the lining doesn't have a chance to heal from maybe that little bit of extra acid. So it's constantly, the lining is constantly being maybe eroded even or damaged at
Sure,
least.
sure.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. What's lucky is that the esophagus is a little bit of a stronger, more durable tissue than, say, the throat tissue. So if it
Okay.
makes its way all the way up the throat, your throat is going to suffer a bit more.
Okay. And what is the most common symptom? Would there be any, obviously we know that feeling of acid reflux or if our food is repeating on us, but are there any other signs or symptoms that we should be aware of?
Yeah. Okay. So with typical GERD, when we're just talking about, acid
Mhm.
reflux, you might have a sour taste in the mouth. You might have that throat burn. The heartburn is that telltale sign, which everybody talks about, right?
Yeah.
But there's other symptoms. So let's take you back to 2017 when I had a health scare of my own. Had no idea what was going on.
Okay.
I was relatively healthy. I, was caretaking. I have young children with me. I'm raising young children. I have my mother-in-law moving in. She's 93, has dementia, getting pretty frail.
Wow.
So I'm stressed, okay, and working, being a mom, all
Yeah.
that. Um, so I was stressed at the time. I was experiencing some pain, like in my chest. Okay. So it wasn't your typical chest pain, like heart attack chest pain, but it was a sharp pain in the diaphragmatic region. Okay. What I didn't know at the time was that where the pain was where the stomach meets the esophageal junction. And that's where the LES is, the acid can reflux up. That I didn't know. Made a doctor's appointment, sent me home with a clear bill of health. There's nothing wrong with your heart. You're fine. They weren't looking for acid reflux or GERD. Didn't understand it. It kind of happened every now and then. It was annoying. It hurt. I meditated. I got through it. Then I started having allergy symptoms. So, yes, with GERD, you can have symptoms of phlegm in the throat, consistent chronic throat clearing, sometimes a chronic cough, hoarseness of your voice. So, yes, I had that consistent throat clearing. I didn't have the cough, but my voice did get a little hoarse from time to time. But what really was kind of interesting was that I was starting to feel like my swallowing was impaired a bit. I feel like food would get stuck in my throat, but not to a degree where I couldn't literally swallow, but just kind of like, this is kind of weird. It feels kind of gummy in here. And it feels kind of weird. I would lick I licked the end of a spoon that had some peanut butter on it once, just because, you like peanut
Yes.
butter. I like
Yeah.
who doesn't every
Why
now and then
not?
take a peanut butter?
Exactly.
I didn't eat a whole lot of it, but it felt like I had taken a whole dollop of peanut butter and it was stuck in my throat for some considerable amount of time. So that feeling, that throat sensation is another sign, right? Having a feeling like there's a lump in your throat,
Mm.
feeling a little bit of difficulty swallowing, hoarseness, uh, and even like breathing difficulties. You may not think of it, but sometimes a little bit of acid can make its way into your lungs. And so sometimes you feel a little bit of breathless, which I did have those symptoms as well. So it really wasn't until I had an extreme sensation where my throat tightened up and it was already probably really swollen and red and irritated from all that acid refluxing up and back
Mm.
consistently. Of course, I didn't know I had acid reflux. I thought I had allergies.
Yeah.
It seemed like allergy symptoms. Yeah, it seized up. I thought I couldn't breathe. When I came to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm okay. I can breathe. Call the doctor, made clear that I would get an appointment right away for the ear, nose, and throat doctor. We call it the ENT
Yeah.
here in the States. And they didn't have anything for a month. And I'm like, no, I need something now. Advocated, got an appointment, and Sure enough, I was diagnosed with GERD. Shocking because I wasn't experienced like the telltale heartburn all the time. And that
Mm.
pain in the chest did not feel like heartburn because I've had heartburn before. Everyone's had it every once in a
Mm.
while. So, yes, those are some of the signs that you can have. And you wouldn't know it. It's a form of GERD called silent reflux.
Okay. And do you think that some of us are more susceptible to it and then stress just exacerbates it? Or can stress can be I suppose, a cause and a driver?
Yes, you got it
Yeah.
exactly. Cause and driver. Yes,
Yeah.
certainly. Like I said, I was extremely stressed
Mm.
at the time. Um, but yes, stress in people who have stress, there's people who tend to be more anxiety ridden,
Mm.
people who have a tendency more toward anxiety. That is actually hereditary. You might be surprised, but certain levels of anxiety, being more prone to anxiety, can be hereditary. So
Yeah.
people with that may be more prone to possibly getting GERD.
Yeah.
The stress does impact the digestive system. It kind of
Massively.
puts the digestion at a halt because
Yeah.
if you think of fight and flight, it's got to stop that so that it can take care of other things that you need to do, that perceptive vision, that being able to run, being able to get that heart rate going. So that will impact your digestion. When your digestion's not moving smoothly and evenly enough as it should be, you might feel some bloating or gas, or even if you don't, that extra intra abdominal pressure can put pressure on the sphincter, the LES, as we explained, and in which case that can remain open. And so when there is those excess acid in the stomach, it can come back up and reflux up. So a driver, yes,
Yes.
and kind of causal in a way as well.
Yeah. And so you were diagnosed with, was it a scope, or how were you diagnosed?
Yeah, so we had endoscope. So it went
Yeah.
through my nose. They went all the way so that they could see the throat tissue because the throat was the point of contention, when I had explained it. I don't think they needed to go all the way down, through the mouth to see the esophagus. But it was very clear that from that little camera on the end of that thin tube that you feed down, and they can clearly see it was swollen, it was red, it was irritated, clear sign
Yeah.
that I had silent reflux, with the clinical symptoms that I had described, and also my distress and all that.
And how did you then heal your GERD? Would you have had to take any medications initially and then look at the diet? And you mentioned meditation earlier as well.
Yes. Yes, I did do a course of proton pump inhibitors. We call
Mm.
them PPIs. You could find things like that on the over the counter, for acid reflux. I took a double course of that because the horse pill they described me was like much too big for me
Yeah.
to swallow, considering the fact that my throat was already so irritated and swallowing. I'm like, I'm not taking this. Do you have anything else? He's like, just double the dose. So I was on PPIs for a while. I didn't realize at the time because my focus of study, my focus as a dietitian was not, with the gut health and GERD. I hadn't known a huge amount of it. I knew a
Mm.
little bit, but not a huge amount. I hadn't put a lot of research into that. I didn't realize at the time that the PPIs are actually kind of counterproductive. They kind of slow the digestive system, kind of put your, delay that gastric emptying, which is not great. So even though they're lowering that acid, which can allow you to heal, and I think that I probably needed that just to get a kickstart into healing so that the acid wouldn't keep refluxing up, or as much acid would be possible to reflux up if it was going to reflux. At least it was lowering the amounts. So I had to taper myself off. I knew enough and I had
Yes.
done enough research at that time to know I need to taper off. I have to tell my doctor I'm not taking these anymore. They don't know as much they don't always know everything. They're like, oh, here, you're okay. Yeah, it's getting a little better. Keep taking it. Keep doing what
Yeah.
you're doing. Diet, yes.
Mm.
Temporary elimination diet of everything, including dairy because it
Mm.
can be inflammatory for some people. Including, spicy foods, greasy foods, foods high in fats, caffeine, highly sugared foods. I mean, it runs the gamut. And of course, all those acidic foods that are healthy for you, like berries,
Mm.
which I loved,
Yeah.
or lemons, limes. all the stuff that adds flavor to food is what I didn't have for a temporary amount of time, but I knew that if I continued to cut those out forever, I would lose some valuable nutrients, which can help in healing and help with just overall health. So yes, I did do a course of temporary and slowly adding things back in.
Mm. That is a good point about the PPIs because definitely we need to, we can be in a position where we need to take medication in the short term. But with the PPIs, I presume one of the things that you might be conscious of is not being able to break down your foods that you can absorb your vitamin B12. That's a big issue with people who are on PPIs a long time.
Absolutely,
Mm.
yes, yes.
Just, sometimes people might say, oh, my stomach acid is too high. Is it more that the stomach acid is in the wrong place? We need stomach acid, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we do. And it does
Yeah.
need to be high at certain times when you have that amount of food or the
Mm,
type of needs the help of those acids to digest. We know that the proteins are much harder to digest than, say, your light carbohydrates.
yeah.
We know that fats are harder to digest. So we do want that stomach acid. Ultimately, that's what's necessary to break down the foods and get the nutrients that you need. We just need to control, so that it's not too much
Yeah.
and that you're not going to have it pushing up, the pressure of the stomach pushing up against the LES
Mm,
and allowed. So really, it's more or less controlling the distension of your stomach, so to speak. And so that means smaller meals, maybe more frequent meals to get in enough foods and nutrients, vitamins, like as you say, vitamins,
yeah.
vitamins,
Yeah.
minerals.
Vitamins.
Yes, but actually pacing yourself and eating an amount of fat that you can tolerate at a time. Everyone's different. I am a small body. Small people don't generally digest as much as people who are larger, who have larger needs. So maybe if you've eaten like a whole avocado, maybe a half of an avocado at once. I'm just saying, just to give you a sense, it's sort of cutting back, but not entirely. And obviously, you do the elimination diet, you build foods back in, you see what you can tolerate, how much, and how often. You have to listen, right?
Exactly.
To your body.
It's really quite personalized, isn't it, the approach?
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
were there any foods that you came across which are really good for the healing? You've mentioned some of the foods that might irritate it, but like obviously spicy foods, coffee, alcohol, fizzy drinks, all of those kind of things, and maybe too much fat in the diet as well. But are there any foods which you sort of came across on your journey that were actually really good for the healing?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yogurt,
Mm,
probiotics. For me, fermented foods, but not
yeah.
everyone, because it can cause issues. It has issues for some individuals. And some individuals actually find that they're somewhat lactose intolerant. And so even though lactose intolerance is not like causal, it's not necessarily like linked to GERD. If you have lactose intolerance and you have that bloating and the gas from the lactose that's not clearly fully digested, then that's going to push a little against the esophageal sphincter or keep it open and allowing for the reflux to reflux up, in which case the lactose intolerance can seemingly or indirectly lead to episodes of GERD or symptoms.
Oh, very good. Um, you mentioned briefly meal timing earlier, that you might need to maybe finish eating a little bit earlier in the evening. I presume that's before you lie down, because when you lie down, gravity isn't helping you to keep the acid down in the stomach. So would you say smaller meals and then finish eating a good 2 hours before you go to bed, or would you recommend even earlier?
For me, 3 to 4 hours was imperative.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Okay.
was practically following an intermittent fasting, not on purpose, but just because it was hard for me to eat. I had lost a bunch of weight. It was hard to get food to go down because my throat was so sore and irritated. And for me, I felt I needed that 4 hours. But I would say generally about like 2 to 3 hours. And I would say that once you've kind of managed your GERD and have it in control, through diet and understanding how much and how often you can eat certain foods that might be a little more spicy or might have a little bit more like some garlic or onions. Some
Yeah.
people need to eliminate those more often. And some people, maybe a little bit of garlic powder could be okay. You know, you're
Mm.
off that bland diet. You need to be able to enjoy those berries, those foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals that were maybe previously contributing to the symptoms of GERD. But once you're set and you kind of have an understanding, I do say everyone has a life and things come up. And sometimes you have an event or something, maybe it was a later workout and you don't get home till 9 and you're growling, your stomach's growling, you're hungry, you hadn't really eaten much in the afternoon. I would say have a light snack, even though you're going to go to bed, say maybe 10:30. Have something that you can easily digest. In my case, crackers, cheese, a little bit of crackers and cheese can be fine. But if I ate like a piece of chicken, that might take too long to digest and it would sit in my stomach. And then like half an hour later, I'd start to feel issues laying down in bed.
Yeah.
So it really, there's no, I don't like to put hard rules. I like to say
Mm.
general guidelines.
Exactly, and principles that people can tailor. If with a say a diary where you're taking note of what you've eaten and the symptoms, you can figure it out. With the help of a professional to figure out what's going to work for you. So something like you mentioned, so berries might irritate people, but if you had berries, say, in a smoothie with yogurt, would that help? Or is it better to sort of completely do a complete elimination to begin with?
Okay, so with my clients, I start off with a complete elimination just
Mm.
to start from the base, right? Let's all start off together in one place. Let's
Yeah.
go through this. We're going to add foods back in. Once you've added things back in and you're going to have a little bit of berries and have it with almonds. Add some
Yeah.
almonds to your smoothie. Almonds have a neutral pH. They are not acidic, they are neutral. And so that's a neutralizing food. Yes, yogurt can help because obviously the yogurt has the probiotics. For some people, they might want a lactose-free yogurt just because maybe lactose can bother them. They might be a little more sensitive to lactose or just a little bit less yogurt. But the good news is that yogurt has those probiotics that help reduce incidence of gas and bloating. So you've got that going for it. It certainly was helpful for me to include the yogurt
Yeah,
in my diet.
exactly. And it feels nice and calming and cooling too. And I mean, there's I would take soya yogurt, so there are obviously lactose free and plant options out there too. Um, do you think that GERD is ever fully cured, or is it something that if you have had it, that you kind of do need to manage it throughout your life? Or, obviously there are going to be stresses in our lives. Do you think that it would always be a little bit prone to it if we have experienced it?
Yeah, I think that, yeah,
Yeah.
with stress, you're more prone to the acid reflux.
Mm,
I don't necessarily think it can be actually cured. Now, if you have
mm.
hiatal hernia and you surgically take care of that, and if that was the causal aspect of it, then certainly maybe once you've had the surgery and healed, you may not have that chronic condition of acid reflux. But if you're someone who's had GERD and there might be no fundamental physical problem other than that your LES has been compromised, meaning it's been weakened over time and probably through stress and a lot of different things, and probably the acid refluxing up and down is not helping it.
Yeah.
People get that tightened. That can be surgically done
Okay.
to address that problem. But I think for most people with GERD, it's certainly manageable with diet and exercise and mindfulness
Yeah.
and like, say meditation, yoga, and controlling that stress.
Yeah. And I mean, that's going to be good for our overall health anyway, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned lactose, that some people maybe if they're lactose intolerant, the gas caused by that can be a driver of GERD. When it comes to obviously with dairy intolerance, it can be all dairy, but it can be either lactose or casein. Would you mind taking us through the differences between those two, please?
Yes. Okay. So casein is a milk. Yeah. So casein's a milk protein.
Mm.
Lactose is a milk sugar. So with casein, generally it would be like the milk allergy, right? If you're not
Yeah.
tolerating it, because milk allergy is an overactive immune response to one or more milk proteins.
Mm.
So in that case, you'd probably want to avoid dairy and milk.
Yeah.
That's because an allergy can range from mild symptoms, which can overlap with sometimes those symptoms of like say just like gas and bloating and things like that, to things that are like more severe, like difficulty breathing, and can be life threatening. With
Mm.
lactose intolerance, and that's the case where you have that lactose, which is a milk sugar. When your body doesn't produce enough of the lactase enzyme to fully digest that lactose, what it does is it makes its way down the colon hole, where it ferments and gases are produced. And when those gases are produced, that's why we have that distension, that bloating, the gas, sometimes the pain, sometimes the nausea with that. Sometimes it's very painful and uncomfortable, but it generally is not life-threatening. And with lactose intolerance, I wouldn't say all, but most people with lactose intolerance can tolerate up to 10 grams of lactose per day.
Okay.
So it
Mm.
gives you a little bit of food freedom there, right?
Yeah, especially if you're out and about. Um,
Mhm.
would you recommend, so lactose-free milk obviously has had to have the sugars taken out, and generally speaking, when something is taken out of a food, something else is put back in the processing. Would you recommend lactose-free milk, or do you think that plant-based milks are a better option, or would you say either is fine?
It depends. I mean, there's also milk, like it's
Mm,
called lactate, that basically they put the enzyme lactase in the milk so that it pre-digests before you
okay.
actually even drink. So it's still
Mm,
the milk. They haven't added anything to it.
okay.
So if you certainly like milk, that might be a good option. That said, maybe you could tolerate a little splash of real cow's milk in your morning coffee, and that's it. But because milk is generally pretty high in lactose anyway, that splash might contain, depending on how big your splash is, 1 or more grams of lactose. And if you're trying to keep it below 10 grams a day, maybe you don't want to add. You maybe don't want to worry about it. Or what if I had more than 2 splashes of milk? And
I know.
maybe that plant milk, if you're going to choose the plant milk, make sure it's fortified with calcium and vitamin D, because that it's not equal just because you're swapping it out. It may be just as creamy and it may work the same way similarly in your recipes or what you're using it for. But, another thing is most plant milks are not as high in protein. So
Yeah.
get your protein another way, add some
Yes.
protein powder to it, or choose soy milk, which is pretty much even, if you're not allergic to soy, an even amount of protein as cow's milk.
Very good. And I mean, there are a lot more products available now for people who have dairy intolerances as well. So even when it comes to, apart from the milk and the yogurts, even cheeses and butter as well.
Yes, yeah. Challenge lactose-free butter. That is one
Mm,
option, and it does contain the real dairy. So it's
yeah.
not like they completely took out the dairy. You
Okay.
get that real dairy flavor, which is
Mm,
delicious. But because it's lactose-free, it means it gives people a little bit more like they feel a little better about it. Maybe they don't have to worry about it so much if they're
yeah.
really concerned and like any lactose. It spreads well, it tastes great. And so there is that option.
Mm,
So yeah, lactose free butter is great. There's
yeah.
lactose free yogurts.
Yeah.
And like I said, yogurts also contain those probiotics. And cheeses, they're pretty low in lactose too. So butters and cheeses tend to be, I say specifically hard cheeses, tend to be quite low in lactose.
So,
Um,
yeah.
s- there may not be so much of an issue with that, but like I said, some people, they feel more assured to have something that's lactose free, especially if they've had incidences where it's been extremely painful and uncomfortable and
Mm.
they just don't want to deal with it. And so it's a great option.
Absolutely, and especially to get something, butter is something that people are very attached to. So to find
Mhm.
and not, it is can be hard to get a plant-based version that people are happy with, because especially now in Ireland, we're very attached to our butter. We love our
Oh,
butter on
your
our
butter's
spuds.
so good. Your
Yeah,
butter is so incredibly like flavorful. Our butter
yeah,
is like creamy,
yeah.
and it has that dairiness, but you know, Irish butter,
It's pretty
European
good.
butter, there's this strong, lovely flavor for that.
Yeah.
You can get strong flavor when you clarify butter. So if I were to clarify it and remove some of those, the liquids, and it's this pure, really golden, delicious taste. And I think what I probably really like about Challenge lactose-free butter is that it's made with clarified butter in the mix,
Exactly.
in the blend. And I just have this strong affinity for clarified butter.
Yeah. And so it means that you're not missing out on flavor, even though you're managing
Exactly.
your food intolerances. Yeah. Because I am dairy intolerant myself, like both, casein and lactose. But I do Christmas Day on my roast potatoes, I have real butter. That's I give into it on Christmas Day. But I'm going to keep an eye out for that challenge butter though, because possibly could handle that. I might try it.
It spreads so well too.
Yeah.
You know how like regular butter, you'd have to set it out and put it out and let it soften.
Yeah.
And sometimes like, when you're making cookies or something and it's not soft enough, and then you put it in the
Yeah.
microwave and overheat it and then it's melted, you're like, oh, this isn't going to
Yeah.
work for the cookies. It has to be that
That
perfect soft
creaminess.
consistency.
Oh, that's a good point actually for baking as well. Yeah.
Baking, yes. And
Yeah.
also the fact that if you're like watching them out, or maybe you don't want to, some people have a tendency to spread a lot of butter on
Yeah.
their toast because the butter is not fully soft and you end up with more. But with a spreadable thing, you can get a light, thin layer that has enough of a mouthfeel to take away that dryness of the
Yeah.
toast, but not too much. So that has another benefit to it
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, we have to enjoy our food. I always I think I would have the same sort of principles as you in that I try and work with clients. Obviously, there are times when you just do have to go on a strict elimination for a few weeks, but you have to get back in all, the variety and the diversity of different minerals and nutrients. And you've got to do it in a way that people are not afraid of food, really, isn't it? Lauren, you don't want people to be afraid
Yeah.
of what they're eating because it's nourishment.
Yeah, and it's true. And it is hard. And I have
Yeah.
experienced it myself, how hard it was, even though, in my head and as a dietitian, like I do need to get myself back to
Yeah.
eating normally. I can't
Yeah.
be afraid of food forever.
Yeah.
And I had to really take that mindset and put it deep. And so, like with my patients, a lot of them have food fear.
Mm.
And it's because of the trauma. And
Yeah.
when you've gone through trauma of what that food may or may not have done to you,
Mm.
or knowing that it was a common trigger food that could have likely been part of your exacerbations. You don't want to go back to it.
No.
And it's hard. And
Mm.
but once you realize that there are ways of consuming it without it causing you much distress, or once you learn, like, well, I can tolerate a loose handful of berries with some yogurt. I'm okay with that. And I've proven to myself that I am. But, it's sort of like holding people's hands and taking them on their journey, being there with them. You're going to be okay. Try. If you don't feel great, good, then now. And you're
Yeah.
going to take a smaller next time, or you're not going to. There are some things that I may never fully be able to go back to. I mean, I'm not going to be able to eat a plate of spaghetti that has full cloves of roasted garlic in it. Those roasted garlics are going to really affect me. Yes, if I do on occasion, I know what to expect. And I'm okay because I'm aware of it and I've been there, done that, and I will be okay again.
Yeah.
It's temporary.
Yeah.
There's other times when I know that, hey, there's supplements available that I can take when I know that there might be some disturbance, like marshmallow root or DGL, a type of licorice supplement, that's going to soothe the digestive tract, right? It's going to coat it and it's going to prevent it from feeling that exacerbation from acid refluxing up. So it's a temporary band-aid, but at least the acid's not going to worsen the lining at that point, and be you don't feel as bad
And
with it.
because you're taking, because you're not doing it all of the time, you've built up a
Yeah.
resilience, So say you have holidays coming up or, big family get together and a meal where, you're not doing all the cooking. So you want to
And so
still take part
sometimes
and
you
enjoy
just
it.
want to,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to talk over you,
No,
but
no,
yeah,
you're
sometimes
fine. Yeah.
you want to enjoy it and knowing that you can take certain supplements that will ease it
Mm,
and it won't
exactly.
cause that reaction to be as strong. But you know that it's not a cure-all. You
Mm,
know that taking that every day is just not gonna.
yeah.
If you have some healing that needs to be done, it needs to be healed, and that's through food because food has
Yeah.
nutrients, antioxidants, anti-inflammatory nutrients that are going to help with the healing process, the proteins that
Mm,
are necessary. for healing and having the adequate amount of calories. Because I can tell you from my experience that when I was deep in the throes of it, even though I was still getting up every day, getting my kids to school, kind of caretaking for my mother-in-law and working, I did what I needed to do, but I would go to bed at 9 o'clock completely exhausted because I just did not have enough food to sustain the healing and the well-being and my
Yeah.
everyday activities of life. I was just gone. 9 o'clock in bed. That's it. So knowing that you do need to be able to start include foods again is a really important thing to educate your clients with, is that yeah, it's not necessarily the enemy. You just learn what and how much you can have and how often you
Yeah.
can have of it.
Exactly. So, like a food diary can be a real friend, to help you figure that out. And you have actually written some books as well, Lauren, with particularly for GERD. So I'm going to put links to those. I'll put all of your contact links and where people can follow you in the show notes anyway. But they look fantastic. They
I
look
appreciate that.
brilliant.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're not, just to be clear, these aren't written specifically for people with GERD.
Mm.
As with any recipe, and you can accommodate. It's got garlic
Yeah.
cloves in it. Take the garlic, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I can make pesto without the garlic. It still tastes pretty good. We've got a little bit of sea salt. We use lemon zest instead of maybe the lemon juice, if for some reason a little bit of lemon juice is not tolerable for you. But these are heart healthy recipes. So in general,
Mm.
these are going to provide a wealth of fruits and vegetables, a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, even within each group, like leafy greens,
Mm.
arugula, spinach, chard,
Mm.
not just sticking to like one type within each category, and just a colorful plate overall. So from Mediterranean to just, you know, healthy eating in general or cooking for
Exactly.
one. So they can be adjusted, but they are not specifically for GERD because everyone's different and people can have very specific needs with GERD.
Mm.
And there are some foods that might be best to kind of not have in such high amounts, depending on where you are in your journey with
Yeah.
GERD.
Oh, very good. And as I said, when we eat whole food, we might think we're doing it for one part of our body, but actually it's helping, whole food is going to help our overall health as well. So we're winning all around when we eat good whole plants and grains
Yes,
and
put that on a shirt.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant. Oh my gosh, you've been so informative, Lauren. Thank you so much for all of your time and your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that.
My thanks to Lauren for her time and expertise, and she had some really great insights there about GERD. So the store cupboard staple is a digestive aid, ginger. Now, according to Johns Hopkins, ginger is one of the best digestive aids because of its medicinal properties. It's alkaline in nature and anti-inflammatory, which eases irritation in the digestive tract. Now, when we buy ginger fresh, it comes in the form of a usually thick tuberous rhizome, which might have little arms sticking out of it. Now, a rhizome is the underground root structure of a plant and you might see little lateral shoots coming out of it and other roots. Fresh ginger definitely has the freshest taste, but we can also buy it in powder form. You might also see crystallized ginger. So this is when it's cooked in sugar syrup, dried and rolled in sugar. So that really is more of a treat and to be taken in smaller quantities. Now, ginger originates in the Eastern Asia, India, and China, and has even been mentioned in ancient literature by Confucius. It was always thought to have great properties for cooking, but also medicinal properties. Almost 2,000 years ago, the Romans imported ginger from China, and so it became popular in the Mediterranean, even though it was considered to be an expensive spice. In the 9th century, Spanish explorers introduced it to the West Indies, Mexico, and South America. And in the 16th century, they started exporting it back to Europe, where it became popular as a condiment, just like salt and pepper on the table. In English pubs in the 19th century, bartenders even put it out on the bar for people to sprinkle on their beer. So I think this is the origin of ginger ale. It has a long tradition of being effective in aiding GI distress and is regarded as helping to alleviate wind and to relax and soothe the GI tract. Research has shown ginger to have anti-inflammatory and anti-nausea properties. Now, it does contain small amounts of oxalates, so if you're prone to kidney stones, consume it in moderation. As usual, of course, if you're on any medications or living with any conditions or illnesses, always check if any foods, herbs, or spices should be avoided or minimised. So, what can we do with our fresh ginger root or rhizome? Well, we start by peeling the thick skin off, and then we can slice it or julienne the root. Now, to make your own homemade ginger tea, steep 1 or 2 half-inch slices in a cup of hot water for about 10 minutes and just cover the cup. And that'll keep it nice and warm, and you'll really draw out that lovely ginger into the water. You can also make a cold drink. So if you add your ginger tea to ice and with half a teaspoon of honey, that makes a lovely sweet cold drink. You can add it to your salad dressings with tamari or soya sauce. And of course, a lot of people probably already add it to their stir fries. Now we can also add it, of course, to smoothies, lollipops, juices. You've probably seen or tasted it already with carrot, but it's actually lovely with apple as well. So hopefully there's enough information there to encourage you to pop some more whole foods into your shopping trolley this week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I just wanted to clarify that the podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional care from a doctor or trained health professional, nor constitute medical advice or services if you're in a position to need either. However, if you found it interesting, you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes, or sign up for my newsletter on lynsharkeynutrition.ie.